Have you ever really stopped to think about how an app on your phone or a website you use every day actually gets updated? It just kind of happens, right? Well, behind that Update Now button, there's this hidden world, this incredible story of technology that has just completely transformed over the last 2 decades. So let's pull back the curtain and go on this wild 20-year journey of software deployment.
To really get where we are now, we have to go back. I mean, way back. For a second, just imagine that sound, that screeching, buzzing sound of a dial-up modem connecting. That was the world where our story starts. A time of, well, a lot of patience, tied-up phone lines, and the very first baby steps of putting stuff on the web.
All right, before we get any deeper, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What even is a software deployment tool? Simply put, it's anything that helps get code from a developer's computer to a live server where you, the user, can actually interact with it. You can think of it as the delivery truck that takes the finished product from the factory to the store.
Okay, so our journey kicks off in what you could only describe as the Wild West of the web. This was the era of doing everything by hand, where just getting a simple website online felt like a huge, monumental achievement. So welcome everyone to the age of FTP.
Man, this is a total time capsule. The source author talks about his very first website, and it had all the classics. Blinking text scrolling across the screen, those amazing animated GIFs, the dancing hamsters and stuff, and of course the little page counter at the bottom to see how many people had visited. And how did this all get online? Through this clunky web-based thing called a file manager.
The next step up from that was a dedicated program, an FTP client. This was the real workhorse of the early 2000s. But the process, it was just painfully manual. You had to remember every single file you changed and then literally drag it over to the server. And to be safe, most of us would just re-upload the entire website every single time. It was slow, it was tedious, and it was so easy to break something.
So you might be asking, was any of this automation? The author gives us a really clear answer here. A definitive no, not even close. It was pure manual labor, and it created this desperate need for something better, something smarter.
And that, of course, brings us to our second era, the first real wave of automation. This is where developers started to get really clever, using new tools to finally escape that manual grind and try to solve this whole deployment problem for good. The first massive leap forward came with a tool called Git. Now, Git is basically a system for tracking changes to code. And instead of manually dragging files, developers could now securely log into their server, navigate to the right folder, and just type one command, git pull. This was revolutionary. It automatically grabbed all the latest changes so you didn't have to keep a list of what you touched. It was a huge improvement.
But you knew there was a but, right? There was a big catch. What happens if that git pull command fails halfway through? Maybe a network hiccup, a file conflict. You could be left with a site that was half old code and half new code. In other words, completely broken. And for any real business, that was a massive, unacceptable risk.
And right on cue, a tool called Capistrano came along and just changed the whole game. It was built with one single purpose in mind, to solve this exact problem. How in the world do you deploy software safely without taking your website down and risking that broken mess?
The magic behind Capistrano is something called an atomic deploy. Here's how it works. Instead of changing files in the live folder, it builds the entire new version of the website in a completely separate hidden folder. Then, only when everything is 100% ready to go, it flicks a tiny little switch, it's called a symbolic link, that instantly points all the web traffic to the new version. The result? Zero downtime. And if something goes wrong, you just flick the switch back. It's so simple, but so incredibly effective.
So just as things were getting stable and predictable, a brand new technology showed up that would, once again, change everything. This was the beginning of the container revolution, and it was an era born from maybe the most famous or infamous phrase in all of software development. Well, it works on my machine.
And that technology was Docker. As the author puts it, Docker wasn't just some small improvement. It was a total paradigm shift. It completely disrupted how everyone, from a single developer working on a laptop to the biggest companies in the world, thought about building and running software.
Now, here's the absolute key thing to understand about Docker. It's not really a deployment tool, it's a packaging tool. It lets you bundle up your application, along with its database, all its libraries, everything it could possibly need to run into a single neat little box called a container. And that container will run the exact same way on a developer's laptop, on a testing server, or live in production. The whole "it works on my machine" problem, finally solved.
So of course, Docker was a massive success, which naturally led to a brand new, much bigger problem. You see, if one container is great, what happens when your complex application needs dozens or even hundreds of them all working together? This created a whole new need, the need for orchestration.
I mean, really think about it. How do you manage the health, the networking, and the scaling of thousands of these little containers all at once? Trying to do that by hand is it's impossible. You need a system, some kind of brain, to manage all of that mind-boggling complexity.
And that brain is Kubernetes. Honestly, the best way to think about it is as the conductor for your container orchestra. Kubernetes is the one telling each container what to do, when to start, when to stop, how to talk to each other, and if one of them fails, it automatically brings up a new one to take its place. It manages the entire symphony of a modern web application.
With this level of automation, things started to get, well, honestly, a little bit futuristic. The author describes a workflow where the entire complex deployment process could be kicked off just by typing a simple command to a chatbot in a Slack channel. That's how seamless and incredibly powerful this whole ecosystem became.
So let's just do a quick recap of this whole journey. We went from manually dragging and dropping files with FTP to some basic automation with Git pull, then we got safe automation with Capistrano, followed by consistent packaging with Docker, and finally managing it all at a massive scale with Kubernetes. What an incredible evolution.
So after that whole 20-year trip through technology, what's the big lesson here? What's the moral of the story? Well, it's really easy to get lost in all the cool new tools, but the real takeaway is about understanding the difference between the tool you're using and the actual goal you're trying to achieve.
And this brings us to a super critical distinction. Deployment and release. They are not the same thing. Deployment is a technical task. It's just putting code on a machine. A release, on the other hand, is a business operation. It's making a new feature available to your customers. You can deploy new code 10 times a day without ever actually releasing a single new thing to your users.
And this all leads up to the author's really powerful conclusion. The goal isn't to use the fanciest, most modern technology out there. The goal is to serve the business. And if an old, simple FTP process is supporting a business that's making money, it is, by definition, more successful than a team using all the latest tech to power a business that's just burning through cash.
So this leaves all of us with a final, really crucial question to ask ourselves. Are the tools that you're using truly helping you achieve your primary goal? Or are you just chasing the latest trend because it's new and shiny? The history of deployment teaches us that technology is just a means to an end, and the most important thing is to never, ever lose sight of what that end is.